Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jay Smink with the National Dropout Prevention Center, and I am here with my co-host and colleague, Marty Duncanfield, also with the center. And we welcome all of you to the final monthly radio webcast of this school year. As always, this program is brought to you by the National Dropout Prevention Center at Clemson University in partnership with the Clemson Radio Productions and with the generous support of Ben Foster.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to have you back with us for our program today for Solutions to the Dropout Crisis. We're happy to have our many regulars join us, but we especially want to welcome the new listeners to the program. You know, summer's in the air. Many schools have already dismissed their students for the summer, and so our topic today couldn't be more timely. It's time to think about those summer months and how they can play a significant role in dropout prevention. And, Jay, we have just the right guest for that assignment. But first of all, let me remind our listeners of the materials that are provided on the website for today's program. These include, first and foremost, the slide presentation, which is, in fact, a PowerPoint to support today's discussion. So have that open and ready. There are a variety of articles relating to the research behind the need for learning over the summer months and the connection to the achievement gap. So you'll want to have a look at those after the program is over. We have a video posted with a discussion with Ron Fairchild of the need for summer learning. A lot of links to the National Summer Learning Association and some other organizational websites that look at these hours after school or summer that can provide our listeners with more useful tools and information. So, Jay, looks like there's quite a lot of information here for our listeners to turn to at the end of the program.
Yes, once again, a great compilation of resources, Marty. And today's program is just the first step in discovering what can be done to prevent the loss of achievement over the summer months.
You know, as always, we invite you to be an active part of the program today, and so we do have two ways you can connect to us. Because this is a radio call-in show, we encourage you to call in your questions for our guests. We have a toll-free number. It's 888-539-8859, and for those calling outside the U.S., oh, that would be so fun if that happened. The number is 864-656-4549. You may begin calling in now or any time during the program. We'd put you on hold for a few minutes, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we can during the broadcast. We also accept email questions sent to our email address, which is ndpc@clemson.edu. If you put the word solutions in the subject line, I can spot it right away, and we'll try to get to those questions as well. So we're looking forward to your participation, whether through calls or questions on email.
Well, Marty and our listeners, our topic this month is summer learning. And with summer just now beginning, I think all of us are ready to learn what can be done during these upcoming months to help all of our students to continue to grow over the summer. Our guests today are Brenda McLaughlin and Bob Siedel, both from an organization known as the National Summer Learning Association. Brenda is vice president, and Bob is the policy director. This organization has roots going all the way back to 1992, when it had its beginnings at the Johns Hopkins University, and continued growth of a growing body of research on this summer slide, an interesting new note. The need was seen for a national organization to focus on making summer learning available to all children, and especially high-risk children. In 2009, the center became an independent organization named the National Summer Learning Association. And so here we are today with Brenda and Bob, staff from this new organization, and we are eager to get to know how this organization works, and also in particularly what challenges and what solutions they have to offer this world that we work in all the time, known as dropout prevention. So we welcome Brenda and Bob to this radio webcast, and we welcome your ideas.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be here.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to be with you again.
Today's program looks to be a very important one, so let's begin. Now, again, to be sure that you can call us with your questions, the number again is toll-free, 888-539-8859. And for those calling outside the United States, it's 864-656-4549. Brenda, let's turn to that PowerPoint now and learn more about this new perspective that you will be sharing with all of us today.
Thanks, Jay. That's great. We're really excited to be here and very excited to be able to talk on behalf of the field of summer learning. There are wonderful programs that are really making a difference for kids, and we're going to talk about a few of them today. So just to give you an introduction to who we are, thank you for talking about our history. And as you said, one of the reasons that the National Summer Learning Association came to be is because of the strong research foundation showing that without continued support and practice over the summer months, kids regress on measures of academic progress, specifically math and reading. Another one of our core beliefs, which is our mission and vision, if you're looking at that slide, is that summer programs really benefit tremendously when schools and community organizations work together to deliver a high-quality program. We know from talking in the field that kids and parents expect programs to look and feel different from the school year. And the other thing we know is that community partners really abound during the summer months, bringing resources and expertise not typically available through the schools. The outdoors become part of the program. Museums and libraries naturally have programming available. So really, when you combine these two, you can make the best use of resources. And that's one of the ways that we as an organization hope to help the field, is by bringing resources, information, and making connections between schools and community organizations. If you turn to the next slide on your presentation about the key discussion points, I'm just going to preview what you'll hear today from Bob and I. The first thing we're going to talk about is, what does that research say on summer learning loss? What do we know about what kids stand to lose? What are the similarities between the research on summer learning loss and the research on early warning indicators of high school dropout? What are summer programs doing to reverse these research trends? And what features do programs have in common that are reversing these trends? And then lastly, we're going to talk about the challenges we face as a field and some of the policy solutions that we have available. On the next slide, we ask a question. We say, why summer learning? Why are we even talking about this topic? Why should we care? And I guess before we answer that question, we should probably say what we mean by summer learning. For us, summer learning is a broad term, and it's meant to encompass all of the opportunities that children and youth have to continue their learning and development over the summer months. So it might be a sleepaway camp, a summer school program, a library summer reading program, or things that you do at home to reinforce learning with your kids. So really, it's a very broad term, purposefully meant to encompass all of those supports for learning and development that we know are out there. But now I'll go back to the question, why summer learning? You'll see there's several reasons listed here, but for us, the answer is really simple. How many other educational issues do you know about where there's over 100 years of research showing the same result? So since the first known study in 1906, which was conducted by William S. White, who was a math teacher, over 40 studies have examined whether youth are susceptible to learning losses over the summer months. Studies have consistently found that all kids tend to lose math skills regardless of who you are. But where it becomes critically important for this network and for dropout prevention is lower income kids are more susceptible to losses in reading, which can significantly contribute to the achievement gap between lower and higher income youth. And when we go on to the next slide in just a minute, I'm going to spend some time expanding on this point. So that's one thing I want to really hit on this why summer learning, is that we know it has such a significant relationship to the achievement gap. The second thing is that we hear all the time from teachers and summer providers how great a time summer is for innovation in teaching and learning. You can try new techniques and curriculum. You can be more experiential and hands-on, integrating field trips or work experience into the program. So there's really more of an ability to be creative in designing and implementing a program in the summer. So the next slide, Summer Learning and the Achievement Gap, this is where we really dig into this research. This takes us back to the research I was just talking about. And what I'd like to do here is spend a couple minutes on one of the most notable studies on summer learning loss. This study was conducted by Carl Alexander, Doris Entwistle, and Linda Olson at Johns Hopkins University, and it was a study called the Beginning School Study. This particular study followed about 800 Baltimore City public school children over the course of more than 20 years. It began in 1982, and it started by following kids who were entering the first grade and followed them through high school graduation and beyond. So what's so interesting about this study is that when the researchers initially began the Beginning School Study, they were interested in early schooling and patterns of social inequality. So, for example, they wanted to compare what the school experiences of lower-income youth were to those of higher-income youth, compare the experiences of minority youth to majority youth, things like that. But what ended up being the storyline for them and what has made this study so popular was the big finding around summer learning loss. So what they were able to do when they followed these kids over the course of those 20 years is when they looked at where the kids were at ninth grade, 2/3 of the ninth grade achievement gap in reading between lower and higher income youth were able to be traced back to differences in those kids' summer learning experiences during the elementary school years. So in other words, during the school year, lower income and better off youth were making learning gains at much the same rate. However, in the summer, lower income youth were losing reading skills each summer while their better off peers were continuing to make slight gains. So when those cumulative losses added up, summer after summer, lower income youth were nearly 3 years behind their better off peers by the end of fifth grade, which is really, really staggering. And 2/3 of that gap was traceable back to summer learning differences during elementary school. One thing that's also important for us to point out about this study, and that's on this slide, is those summer learning shortfalls in the elementary school years did have later life consequences. So the lower income young people were less likely to be placed in a college-bound track. They were less likely to graduate from high school, and ultimately they were less likely to go to college. So when you think about this, one of the natural questions that we get a lot when we present this information is, what were the better income kids doing, the better off kids doing in the summer that accounted for their ability to continue making slight gains? What was the real difference here? And we asked the researchers this because we wanted to make sure that we understood exactly what they found. And what they said was that really the middle-income kids had a more expansive realm of experiences. So they were more likely to go to the library and take books home. They were more likely to attend museums and concerts and field trips. They were more likely to take out-of-town vacations, be involved in organized sports or lessons like swimming or gymnastics or piano. So it wasn't necessarily that the better off kids were in summer school or summer camp. They might have been, but rather that their set of experiences was larger and more well-rounded. So I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that in this research when we think about and we turn our attention to later to the solutions. We need to think about what it actually was that the kids had access to that were helping them to continue to make gains. If you turn to the next slide, this is where there's a graph that depicts exactly the relationship we were just talking about. So I'm gonna point to a couple of different things on the slide and hope that you can follow along. One is that you'll notice if on the very left-hand side of the graph, even before kids start kindergarten, there's a gap of about half a year in reading between the lower and middle income youth. So some of you might be familiar with an important study done by Hart and Risley called Meaningful Differences that talks about differences in kids' home and community environments in the early years and how that might contribute to the achievement gap. So we can assume that perhaps some of the differences between the lower and middle income youth are attributable to differences in resources in the home before kids get to school. But the next thing I want to point you to is I want you to look at the slant of the lines on this graph. So you'll see that there's a school year, which is the larger space between the lines represents a school year. And then between each school year, there's a smaller space between the lines, which is summer. And you'll notice that during the school year, the lines appear to be very similar for both groups of youth, both the lower income youth and the better off youth. And this indicates that the lower income youth and the middle income youth are really progressing in their reading at much the same rates during the school year. So they're gaining about the same amount of reading knowledge during the school year. But when you shift your attention and you look at how those lines are different during the summer, a very different pattern emerges. The lower income youth experience significant losses in reading, while the middle income youth either stagnate or continue to make slight gains. So now go to the far right-hand side of that graph, and you see that the lower-income youth are now nearly 3 grade equivalents behind their better-off peers in reading. So they started before kindergarten at about half a year. By the end of 5th grade, they're just under 3 years. And when we went back and asked the researchers what happens after 5th grade, this is what they told us. If you were to extend this graph out, by the 9th grade, lower-income youth would be about 3.5 grade equivalents behind their middle-income peers. However, here's a statistic that's even more staggering, and one that I actually haven't brought up in my presentations before because I just went back and reviewed my conversation with the researchers. And what they said is, if you look at the kids in the sample who eventually dropped out of high school, and you compare them to the kids in the sample who eventually went to college, in the 9th grade, the gap between those two groups of kids was 6.5 grade equivalents apart. So the kids who eventually dropped out of high school were 6.5 grade equivalents behind their peers who eventually went to college in reading. And even with that large of a gap, 2/3 of it could be traced back to differences in summer experiences. So I think that's pretty powerful.
This is a very compelling piece of information. And I wanted to point out to our listeners that one of the items on your website is this article, Summer Can Set Kids on the Right or Wrong Course. And that's a compilation of research by Carl Alexander. And there's a wonderful graph on the second page of that really shook me up because it did show this point that you're making about during the school year, their growth is comparable. But wow, when you look at what happens over the summer months, year after year after year, and how that takes its toll, it's very graphically described there as well. So I just recommend that article for everybody.
Brenda,
Thanks, Marty.
Brenda, I'd like to add a note at this point also. Just a point of clarification, and I'm sure you would do this. And when on the studies that you've been looking at and reviewing, what we're really talking about is the loss that occurs, whether it be reading, math, between a spring and fall period. That's the line that you were talking about on your graph there. That's a short line. So I just wanted to bring that out to our audiences so that they were reviewing the data in that way.
That's absolutely right. Thank you. And the reason that the researchers were able to look at patterns of achievement both during the school year and during the summer was because the school system had a spring and fall assessment that they were administering during that period of time. So when they looked at the achievement patterns that were happening from fall to spring, and then they looked how those patterns might be different from spring to fall, that's when you saw the dramatic drop-off in learning from the spring to fall assessment. So I appreciate that. One thing I'll do is if you move on to the next slide, it's called Summer Risks for Younger Youth. We talked about that we have over 100 years of research on learning loss in reading and math, and that's because those are areas that are traditionally very easy to measure by standardized tests. But one thing that we really don't know yet is what else might kids be losing when they don't have access to certain supports and resources over the summer months. So, for example, with the Dropout Prevention Network, we know how much you know about the importance of access to caring adults and enriching experiences, meals, a positive peer culture. All of these things are really important for young people. And I think we're just really beginning to understand what other types of losses might be happening for kids when they don't have access to quality summer learning opportunities. This slide points out a few of the emerging research areas, but the one I'm going to talk about today is health and nutrition, since childhood obesity is certainly on the minds of many people these days. Researchers at Ohio State University examined weight gain and growth patterns among early elementary school youth, trying to look at how kids grow and develop during the school year and how that might be the same or different from how they grow and develop during the summer. These also happen to be the same researchers who have done summer learning loss studies, so that's kind of what interested them, and maybe the growth patterns are different elsewhere because we saw that they were different academically. And absolutely what they found was that kids experienced different rates of weight gain. So during the summer, kids were experiencing unhealthy weight gain. They were gaining weight at twice the rate during the summer that they were gaining weight over the school year. And the kids who were most susceptible to unhealthy weight gain were those kids who were either already overweight or who were a minority. Conversely, they also found that kids who were underweight became more underweight during the summer. And there's a couple of reasons that the researchers theorize this might be happening. One might be that summer routines might look very different. So kids might be spending more time in front of the computer or the TV or playing video games. But they may also have less access to healthy meals. And that's one of the other bullets on this slide, which is the Food Research and Action Council tells us that only 1 in 6 kids who are eligible to receive free and reduced meals during the school year are actually accessing those meals during the summer, and this is a national figure. So when you actually dig in and look locally, those numbers are very, very different. So, for example, the last set of numbers I looked at, Oklahoma, for example, only 5% of kids in Oklahoma were accessing meals in the summer if they were eligible during the school year. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because Oklahoma is a primarily rural state, so transportation to summer feeding sites can be very, very challenging. D.C., however, about 95% of the kids who are accessing meals during the school year are accessing summer meals in D.C. But think about the density of the population in D.C. Also recognize that they had a huge campaign to try to enroll kids in summer food programs a few years back, and that has had a significant effect. So if you turn to the next slide, it says significant alignment in findings. And to me, this is really the crux of my presentation, my part of the presentation. What this slide does is it lines up what we know about summer learning loss with some of what we know about early warning indicators that signal whether a young person is on the path to dropping out. We already discussed that by the end of 5th grade, lower income youth are nearly 3 years behind their peers in reading, 2/3 of that being attributable to summer learning loss. But then you think about some of the research coming out of Bob Balfons and others that says the earlier kids develop quote-unquote off-track indicators, the more likely they are to drop out. And in the 6th grade, it so happens that 2 critical off-track indicators are, 1, either failing English or math, or 2, having either attendance or behavioral issues. Now link these findings together, okay, and it paints a really clear picture. If a lower-income young person is nearly 3 years behind their peers in reading by the end of 5th grade, why should we be surprised then that in 6th grade they might be having a hard time with a course, failing a course, or exhibiting some attendance and behavior issues? If you're sensitive to the fact that you're behind your peers and you're not keeping up and you're, feeling upset about that, you probably aren't very motivated to attend school. You might act out a little bit more to mask what's really going on. So I think the link between these findings is really, really, really critical. Another similarity in findings that I want to point out on this slide is that it also seems that there's alignment in thinking about how much time a young person needs in order to gain some ground on closing the achievement gap. So, for example, some evaluations of summer programs show that if a person spends 2 summers in a program, for example, they are gaining more academic skills than if they would only spend 1 summer. Makes sense, right? You need more time to gain some skills. But you also know from the dropout prevention literature that if a young person spends at least 2 years in a classroom with a teacher who is very gifted and has the ability to make accelerated learning the norm, so for example, the average kid in the classroom is gaining more than a year's worth of skills in a year's worth of time, then kids in that class are more likely to close in on the achievement gap with their peers as well. So this is really sending home a message about dosage. How much time do we really need for a young person to gain ground on peers who might be more advantaged or have more resources?
And that just goes right back to those charts you showed us earlier, Brenda, with the loss. It's a cumulative thing, and so you just can't stop having had 1 year. It's year after year after year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's your dosage, really. And the other thing that strikes me about this is, how many years ago, Jay, when I first came to work at the National Dropout Prevention Center, I just thought it was about 16-year-olds and high school kids. And I think we're all becoming more and more aware now that it starts early, and of course our strategies certainly underscore that. But in addition to after school and summer experiences, early intervention is so key. And you're talking about from kindergarten on and earlier too, but really those early interventions play out year after year after year, not just during the school year, but in the summer as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I used to have a former boss who said early intervention is not an immunization shot. And I think we can use that same theory with summer programs. One summer is not an immunization shot. You need summer after summer after summer.
Yeah, I think that's an important point.
Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time talking about the problem. So let's spend some time focusing on what the solutions are, both the programmatic solutions, and then I'll hand it over to Bob for some of the policy solutions. But the next slide in this presentation, it says common indicators of success. And one of the ways to combat these statistics is to make high-quality summer learning programs available to all kids, not just the kids who can afford them. So middle and upper income kids are routinely accessing summer camps, lessons, tutoring, family trips, sports, etc. It makes sense that all kids need these same expansive realm of experiences in order to succeed. So on this slide, what I've done is listed several indicators of success that high-quality programs prioritize for youth, and I'll just, kind of talk about some of them for a minute. So, for example, they prioritize motivating and engaging youth in the learning process. What do you need to do to motivate and engage youth? How do you need to deliver programming differently? How do you get parents involved? What do you need to do to build parents' skills and knowledge to support their kids' learning? How do you explicitly, this is something that I think our high schools need to do a much better job of, and our middle schools and elementary schools as well, but how do you explicitly teach kids habits of success, like managing their time, regulating their own behavior, planning out how to do an assignment? We don't really explicitly teach these kinds of skills to kids, study skills. How do you create a positive peer culture, a spirit within a program? These are all things that high-quality programs are doing, and they're also tracking how well they're doing it. They're monitoring grades. They're looking at how kids are doing in class, whether they're gaining skills and abilities in a particular focus area. How are the kids doing on a social and emotional level? What are they like in their families? Are they getting along with their friends? So not only do they have effective practices, but they monitor what those practices are. So if you go on to the next slide called Features of High-Quality Programs.
Brenda, let me, before you leave this slide, let me make a point that some of the research literature that you talked about the loss in reading and math, but there are many other losses, as you also indicated. But when you listened and look at this list of indicators of success, our listeners today and viewers of this particular PowerPoint should notice that many of the successes are not necessarily always in reading and in math. There's many other opportunities for growth over the summer that sets the stage for academic learning during the regular school year. Of course, it could also be academic learning during the summer, too. That's a point worth making, and I think you've made it once or twice before.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And hopefully, in the next discussion, I'm going to bring up examples of 2 programs in particular. And what you'll see is absolutely you need to have skill building in reading and math. But if you know that what's happening in school is, not enough because in the summer, kids are accessing a different set of resources. You know that you need to wrap around the reading and math for kids to continue to support their growth. So yes, let's continue to give them a leg up with reading and math, but let's also think about how some of these other expansive realm of experiences for middle and upper income kids might be contributing to that success. When you visit a museum, you go on a family vacation, you take a field trip, you're building critical background knowledge. And background knowledge is really important when you are looking at a text and you're trying to interpret what it means. You need to, if you've never seen an animal from the Arctic and you're studying the Arctic, how can you have the ability to recall it? So I definitely think that it's important to have a focus on reading and math, but it's important to be well-rounded as well. So features of high-quality summer programs. On this slide, you'll see that there's a few program features that are pulled out, which I pulled these out because they seem to be extremely important among the programs we talk to. They tell us these are very important. And what I'd like to do is just talk about two programs, and then in the course of talking about these programs, tell you how they align to these features. And the first program I want to talk about is one of our former Excellence in Summer Learning Award winners. This program is called Bridges to a Brighter Future. And it's a program that's run out of Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a smaller program. Its purpose is simple yet immense. Its purpose is to help promising high school students who struggle against significant financial, personal, and cultural barriers to earn a diploma and enroll in college. And specifically, they work to decrease the dropout rate and increase the educational attainment rate for immigrants, minorities, and students from poverty. So the program is designed for kids from 9th through 12th grade. It takes place on a college campus. It's an intensive 3-year experience, so it's got that dosage element we talked about, right? It goes over the course of 3 years. And each summer, it includes a 4-week residential summer experience on that college campus. So kids are getting a feel for what it's like to live that college life while they're there. And when you think about what it means to run a residential program, and this is what they told us in their interview, they have over 350 hours of programming each summer because there's programming offered from morning until night, and it's 7 days a week. So that far exceeds the at least 150 hours that we have there. They absolutely teach courses that kids need, core courses like algebra, writing, public speaking. But they also offer elective courses through the university, like forensics or pottery or music production. They have field trips to cultural institutions. They go to different college campuses in the area once a week. So every week they visit a different college campus. They have a good relationship with the school system. So this is the partnerships, strong partner collaboration that we talked about. The teachers and the principals in the school system actually recommend students who are struggling to them for this program. And then the program, interviews the students, and they make slots available based on need. How much does the young person need this experience in order to change his or her life around and really get on the path to college? So their ratio is very similar. They have a 1-to-7 staff ratio at this program. They have a very good retention rate. They have over 90% of their kids do enroll in college, and actually in 3 years, I think it was like 2003, 2005, 2006 perhaps, they had 100% of that outgoing class enrolled in college. So they've been very successful. And I think that, as you're looking at these features of high-quality programs, and you heard my description of Bridges to a Brighter Future, it was not hard at all to see how they fit in to these many areas.
And I think it does show nicely how universities and colleges can play a role. If I can interrupt your discussion
Absolutely.
of programs for a minute, because we do have a caller who's been on hold from California. Pedro from Richmond, California. You are on the air with a question or comment for Brenda or Bob.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I am an educator. I also have a nonprofit organization that I started called STOP, which is an acronym for Straight Talk on Prison. And my focus in my nonprofit is to use education as a foundation for preventing youth, at-risk youth, especially at-risk youth for gang activity, ending up in prison. or likely dead from the activities that they're involved in on the streets. And I've contracted over the last couple of years with the city of Richmond and developed an academic program where I'm working with at-risk youth for gang activity, and gang activity is a very big problem here. So inherent in that, there are the issues of these kids living below the poverty line and all the other kinds of dysfunctional things that may be going on in their lives that make it difficult for them to get a decent education. I am getting ready to go into the summer, and my wife and I both are doctoral students at Argosy University for the education program, and we are developing a literacy program, but it's fairly, bare bones right now because we really didn't know what would be a good approach with this particular population during the summertime, considering all the barriers that we run into where kids wanting immediately to go back to their friends out on the streets or go back to the gangs in the streets. And I'd like to find ways to draw them in and engage them, as you say in your slide, so that we can get them back into the classroom during the summer. At least those kids that are not actually working in a program called Summer Youth Employment, which I am partnered with, where we get them into jobs during the summer. My biggest concern is actually those kids that are younger, that don't qualify for that program, that are going to kind of slip through the cracks. And so, therefore, I want to develop the best possible program, and I'm really open to any ideas that I could utilize to be able to implement something like that successfully.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. I think two things are coming to mind for me. One is, this is where I think a partnership with a teacher, a highly effective teacher who perhaps has worked in an alternative setting might be a really great addition to your program or to your concept. So I would seek out a partner who has been effective in sort of developing literacy skills among kids who have really found some challenges in the traditional school system and other traditional systems, and enlist that person to help you build a literacy curriculum that's really appropriate for your young people. But the second thing that it made me think about, and it reminded me, I believe there's a publisher right here in the city where I am right now in Philadelphia who publishes a series of books that are high interest but written on a low literacy level for older youth, for teens. So they're written on, an elementary school reading level. However, they're very gritty subjects like gangs, like teen pregnancy, like peer pressure. And I'd be happy, our contact information is at the end of this presentation. I'd be happy if you want to follow up with me via email to connect you to that publisher if that would help.
Absolutely. That
Hi,
would be
Pedro.
very helpful. Thank you.
Pedro, this is Bob, and I wanted to just add to what Brenda had to say. It seems to me that the issues of summer and engaging students during the summer are not that different in some ways from during the school year. A few years ago, an outfit called Civic Enterprises came out with a report on the dropout crisis called the Silent Epidemic. And what they found was that students, previous students, when asked why they had dropped out, said because school was not engaging, it wasn't interesting. And these were students who were not necessarily flunking out. They were quite capable and were succeeding, but they just didn't want to be there. So I think that the issue is very similar for summer, finding activities that are engaging and relevant. The advantage of summer is that you have so much more flexibility compared to the structured school environment of the regular academic year. So that if, for example, you discover through some kind of discussion that some of the students are into skateboarding, maybe the possibility of transforming some public space or a portion of a public space into a skateboard facility would be something that could engage the students. There would be both physical activity involved, and there could be a local public policy issue and a little community organizing to do. That's just one example, but there are just so many things that you could do.
That the real challenge that I face is that the majority of the students that I work with are all kids that are at risk for gang activity or actually are involved in gang activity. So there's a strong pull from the gang culture to draw them back in once they're not dealing with their, commitment to a traditional school year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the other thing we can do is we have a database of summer programs that we can look through to see if there are other folks working with similar populations who might be able to share some of their strategies with you as well. So I definitely appreciate your hard work and on behalf of the kids in your community.
Thank you for calling in, Pedro. That's a really good point to make, and I think this whole idea of incentives to participate is an important issue. And I just wanted to ask, you mentioned a database. Is that on your website, Brenda? Of programs?
We do have program profiles available for members of our association. We have a number of different levels of membership. So there's a free level of membership, and then there's paid levels of membership for individuals and organizations. So if you go on to our website and you become a member, you'll be able to see profiles of folks like our Excellence in Summer Learning Award winners.
Okay, all right. Well, we appreciate the call, and now it's time to move on. I think are you finished talking about Furman? Furman's right up the road from us, by the way.
Oh, great.
This is exciting to know that they're the headliner for your successful programs today. We're going to have to get up the road and visit. It's a beautiful place. Beautiful place. Okay, what's next?
Well, I think that there's so much good policy information here that there's a slide here that has some other successful programs in action. Some of them have been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. Others are really newbies who are just trying out some new summer program approaches. So, for example, Pittsburgh Public Schools and Philadelphia Public Schools are just trying some new approaches this summer, following some principles that we call a new vision for summer school that Bob's going to talk about in his presentation. So I'm going to just move us to the last slide and cut my part of the presentation off, pass the torch, so to speak.
Brenda, before we pass off of this particular slide, and we talked about different populations with our call-in person a little bit earlier. I can see where perhaps his population might be kept together as a cohort. But in these model programs that you're suggesting, do they tend to keep populations together as they are characterized, or is there a mix and match of high-risk kids and moderate and low-risk kids together in a summer environment? Is there any research that suggests one approach is better than another?
It's a really good question, Jay. To answer the first question you asked, do these programs keep kids together in a cohort? Many of them do. So, for example, I talked about Furman was a cohort of kids 9th through 12th grade. Aim High is a program for middle school kids, keeps them together from 6th through 8th grade. Same with Higher Achievement. It's a middle school program. Project Maury is actually a 7-year summer camp experience. It begins in middle school, follows the same group of kids all the way through high school. So several of these programs are following cohorts. Pittsburgh Public Schools and Philadelphia Public Schools are very new this year, so we'll see how many kids continue to come back again next year based on their innovative approaches that they're trying this year. But there isn't a whole lot of research that looks at the differences between programs that have both higher and lower income kids mixed together versus programs that might have just one population or the other. And I think, honestly, it's because there aren't many programs that attempt to have a good mix.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And, one program that we're working with that's actually in Hawaii called the Pueo program. It's Partnerships and Unlimited Educational Opportunities. This is a program that's run out of a private school, an independent school, and it enrolls public school students from a number of surrounding public schools. They come onto the private school campus in the summer. They take these amazing courses right alongside kids from the private schools who are paying to take the courses, and they're really, really benefiting, and they're sending home this message about college experiences. Now, they do that for the first 3 years of the program. This is also a 7-year program. But then in the final years of the program, they actually bring the Pueo kids together as a cohort and support them in different ways because they feel that they need different types of support to get into college and to be college bound than perhaps some of their peers whose parents have been, able to foot the bill and understand, able to amass the resources that they need to get the kids in. So,
okay, that's great,
question,
Brenda. I'll let you move on.
Oh, no, you won't, because I'm here.
Oh, okay.
And I've been chomping at the bit for a couple of slides. The previous one about features of high-quality summer programs, and then this one on key considerations for the research, and I had put a star beside that one, Brenda. Mm-hmm. So before we do move on to my buddy Bob, who I want to hear from, let's just, 2 questions I have. And one is, it mentions on that features of high-quality summer program slide about comprehensive assessment of summer programs. And I look at all these items that you have on here that what makes a good quality program. Do you have a formal assessment that people can use? That's my first question.
Thank you so much for asking that, Marty. Absolutely, we do. We have an assessment that has over 80 different indicators that we're looking for from a high-quality program. And the ones that are listed on this slide are obviously just a select few from that 80. But we've been going on site to examine summer program quality for several years now, and we have just further developed that comprehensive assessment of summer programs so that now it's across a 4-point scale, and we can very clearly spell out across that scale where on the spectrum a program falls in terms of a number of different areas of quality. So we'd be happy to share more information if anyone's interested.
Yeah, and also I just want to underscore what you do have on that slide about the key considerations about dosage and tracking and using partnerships. Obviously, our caller was someone who was an excellent partner and needed more partners, as you were indicated. But this is a community solution, and with the funding issues the way they are today, funding to achieve scale, we do need to reach out to all the members of the community to pull this off. So I think that's a very important slide, and I know we want to get to Bob and talking about policy now because he is the policy director. So can I introduce Bob and let us go onward now? Bob Siedel.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
I hope that folks have found the information on the research to be compelling. I certainly find it that way as I've come to learn more and more about summer learning, both the challenges and the opportunities. The National Summer Learning Association is actively engaged in supporting policy change in education reform at the federal, state, and local level. And I've been particularly working on federal policy. Our agenda, which is the first slide in this section, is in the first place to have the nation recognize, and political leaders in particular who have the access to the resources, the importance of summer learning, and therefore to increase public investment in high-quality summer learning programs. And we have launched a national campaign for summer learning, which is in part about getting more funding. It's also about simply raising the profile of the issue so that it becomes an important part of the education reform discussion across the country. And ultimately, we want to make summer programs an essential component and strategy of high-quality education in the United States. If you look at the next slide, the policy landscape, there's bad news and good news. In the short term, right now, many districts at the local level and states have been cutting, reducing, or even eliminating summer programs because of the overall budget crunch that they're under. But there are several districts and states that have been investing new funds in innovative programs, and we believe that with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act at the federal level, there is a window of opportunity to get summer learning to be an integral part of education policy across the country. If you look at the next slide, there are opportunities already for summer learning funding at the federal, state, and local level. Federal policy, while there are no funds that exclusively are targeted at summer, there are a number of funding streams that can be used to support summer learning programs. Title I funds certainly can. The recent Race to the Top and Investing in Innovation funds, which the Obama administration is hoping to continue with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, certainly are about new ideas and could certainly support summer. Existing programs that heavily engage summer include the 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which focuses mostly on after school, but a lot of summer programs that use those resources. And there are funds through the Workforce Investment Act around summer jobs for young people, and there are opportunities associated with AmeriCorps programs across the country. If you look at the next slide, the opportunities to really do some policy innovation are, in the first place, probably at the grandest scale, if you will, through the reauthorization process of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which different people on Capitol Hill will tell you is moving at a faster or slower pace, but we do expect some progress within the next year. So there's a real opportunity now for us to focus on that. Also, certainly the current, as I mentioned, the Race to the Top and Investing in Innovation funds, particularly around school turnarounds and school improvements. Also, science, technology, engineering, and math education is getting a lot of attention these days, including some resources, and certainly summer is an important opportunity for innovation in STEM education. There's also a fair amount of attention in the education policy world around the transitions certainly between middle school and high school, but even between elementary and middle school, pre-K into K, into kindergarten, and the transition from high school to college or post-secondary education more broadly. There are important roles for summer programs to play in facilitating those key transitions. There are also opportunities with a wide range of innovative reform strategies, including proficiency-based learning, service learning. There are all kinds of workplace and community-based initiatives that work just as well in the summer, maybe even better in the summer, as during the school year. So there are ways for summer learning policy to intersect with a number of these other initiatives.
Now, before you go on to the state policy,
sure.
Bob, we have a caller who's been holding a few minutes, and I don't like to have to make people wait too long. We appreciate their calls, and Sean is called from New York. And so, Sean, you are on the air, and we'd love to hear your question or comment for Bob or Brenda.
Well, I think it's twofold, and would like to have a comment for Brenda regarding the community role in formulating partnerships to help, because if you do have a funding stream to do summer program and academic year program and have a flow through a transitioning, helping kids transition from one grade level to the next, just get a little bit more of your idea of forming these partnerships to help support the work that needs to be done.
Thanks, Sean. That's a great question. And, one of the things that we like to think about is what are the natural opportunities that automatically pop up over the summer months that are a little bit different than what pops up during the school year, and how can we capitalize on those to make the best use of, scarce resources to support kids' education and development. So if you look around your community and you look at some of the things that are happening either with public or private dollars, you'll find your free library summer reading program. You'll find nonprofit community-based organizations. You'll find your national nonprofits like YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs. You may find private philanthropic foundation groups that are funding summer programs at a local level. All of these groups have resources to bear and to bring to supporting the learning and development of young people. Then you also have your schools that are offering summer school programs. And I think what we try to do is look at any given community, because every community is different about what resources you have available. But look at any given community and say, how can we pair these resources up in a way that kids are getting the most sustained access to a high quality program over the longest period of time? How do we combine these opportunities so that enrichment and the special unique skills that each group brings is really brought to bear on the program? So I would be happy to talk offline about this too, but I think Bob has some specific suggestions about partnerships as well.
Well, there's actually a pretty substantial research on school community partnerships specifically to address dropout prevention. And one of the major findings is that community-based organizations that want to work with schools often find schools to be difficult to approach. They don't know who to talk to first, and the question of who has authority to make a decision about a partnership becomes a real issue. So there are a number of resources around this, but the general learning has been that it's important that there be a staff person, whether it's a school staff person or somebody from a community-based organization that's committed to building those partnerships between schools and other organizations in the community, that there be a dedicated staff person who can work with school staff, with the students themselves, with their families, and with community partners to identify specific needs in a specific school, to then turn around and identify the most relevant existing community resources to address those needs and then broker those partnerships. It takes work, and it doesn't just happen. But if you do have can put some initial resources into staffing the brokering of those partnerships, doing the needs assessments and the assets assessments among the students and among the community, then you can have the basis for something that's real strong and ongoing.
And Sean, in New York in particular, there's 3 organizations that come to mind that might be able to help you find, the specific partner you might be looking for. One is the After School Corporation in New York. Another is the Partnership for After School Education, also in New York. And then you have the New York State After School Network, or NYSAN, that can also help you.
And the Children's Aid Society.
Absolutely.
Great, good to know. I think that, Bob, most of what you said, the network that I am affiliated with has the mechanism or the wherewithal to be in the school building, and part of the funding that we have to do what we do for dropout prevention is state-funded, but the linchpin is being able to navigate or to coordinate with these entities that you're talking about in order to get the resources or form those partnerships to provide the service. And I presume that it's all about empowering a director or a dedicated person with the knowledge base to form these partnerships.
Right. As I mentioned, Children's Aid Society has a lot of work on that, and also at the national level, the Coalition for Community Schools could be an excellent resource.
Great. Well, I appreciate your call, and Sean. Good questions and wonderful answers from our guests. Thank you very much for calling. All right, Bob, I guess we got to go back to these policy things. There's so much here.
Okay. Well, I wanted to look at the slide next on state policy.
Okay.
It turns out that about 35 states have summer learning policies. Most of these are not very prescriptive. They tend to include summer programs as an allowable use in other programs or other funding streams. And this means that as a result, most of them don't know how much of their funding actually goes to summer. So we don't have a lot of information about that, and it's something that we think needs to be corrected, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But there are innovative examples. Wyoming has a very strong program, Wyoming Bridges, which I think they're spending $9 million a year for summer programming for students there. The Kentucky legislature has been working on legislation for a substantial program. But there aren't a whole lot of things that are really innovative. And so we think there's a lot of work to be done at the state level. The local policy situation, if you look at the next slide, is characterized by a tremendous amount of variation. There are school-based programs, there are community-based programs, there are school community partnerships. Certainly, there are summer camps, you name it. But where it's what people traditionally think of as summer school, historically this has been, from our point of view, a rather limited vision. It tends to be focused on remedial education and tends to be viewed by students often as punishment rather than as an opportunity. However, there's a lot of fresh attention going to summer learning these days, and there are a number of bright spots around the country, including a number of major cities as listed on the slide. Pittsburgh, which Brenda mentioned, Cincinnati, Baltimore, Philadelphia. There are a lot of things going on. But I want to try to put the policy discussion in a broad frame for a moment. If you'll go to the next slide, which says New Vision.
Bob, can I blow a trumpet? Because this is the part I've been waiting for. The New Vision.
You may blow a trumpet.
Ta-da, ta-da! Because summer school, in my mind, was never an inviting thing, but you're going to make it really good now, aren't you?
We're going to try. The thing is, folks have taken the experiences of lots and lots of local programs around the country, as well as all of that research that Brenda was talking about that really is substantial about what works, what doesn't, and so on. And the folks at the National Summer Learning Association have put together, based on the research, a new vision for summer school, which is a broad framework for policy. And we're actually going to be releasing a major document on this next week, next Tuesday.
Oh, good.
So look at our website a week from now.
All right.
For a lot more details. But let me give you the rough outline here. The amount of summer school or summer programming is important, and we think that it's important that the duration and intensity and scope of summer learning be expanded. Based on the research, we think that a minimum of a 6-week full-day model that makes summer an essential component of district reform policy is really important. We also think that it's important to expand participation from the traditional notion that only the students who are struggling the hardest, who, quote, need remediation, unquote, are the targets for summer school. We think that all students, certainly all students who are in some way at risk for the achievement gap, certainly all Title I students or students in schools with school-wide Title I programs, should be eligible, and we should be expanding programs to include them. However, in fact, summer learning loss is a reality regardless of income, family income level, and so it's really something that we recommend for everybody. We also think, as I think we've tried to say, but I'll make it official here, that it's important to change the focus from the traditional remediation and test prep to a blended approach of core academic learning, certainly the reading and math, but other important subject areas, but also enrichment activities, making summer school something that means athletics and field trips and all kinds of arts activities and learning and those kinds of things, service learning, all kinds of things that are likely to engage students actively. We also think that a core element of the new vision is strengthening and expanding partnerships with community-based organizations and public agencies that provide summer activities, to have them partner with schools and with each other to make the most of the opportunities that they can provide. We, if you will go to the next slide, because the list is a little bit longer, we want to include incentives to students to improve attendance and their engagement by making, and it may sound repetitious, but I think that it's really essential that the so-called enrichment activities are considered of equal weight and at the core of the summer experience along with the academics, or the traditional academics. We also think it's critically important to provide innovative professional development for educators, that summer should be an opportunity for teachers who are under all kinds of demands and restrictions during the academic year. They should be able to look at summer as an opportunity to do something fresh, to try out ideas that they've developed that they just may not have had a chance to do during the school year. And so summer programming needs to be targeted at educators as well as at students. There also ought to be innovative approaches to learning for older students, including proficiency-based learning, flexible credit recovery, internships, college visits, and career readiness opportunities, all those kinds of things. Summer provides a great opportunity for, again, that may not fit in as well in the regular school year. And finally, summer needs to move from the periphery to the center of school reform through stable and substantial funding, through stronger planning and infrastructure, through improved data collection and accountability. Like all of the other school reform initiatives we've been hearing about these last few years, we need to know what works. Just because something's a good idea doesn't mean, it seems like a good idea, doesn't mean that it's going to work. There has to be adequate data collection. There has to be reasonable accountability. And therefore, I think that any leadership that the federal government provides through grant programs or other resources has to include resources at all levels for the collection of data and for the evaluation of programs and the development of best practices and information on what works for the field.
Well, you sure made summer school sound a whole lot different. And what I think if I was a teacher, I would be really excited about participating in summer to get to do all those things. And Bob and Brenda, how does this then play out to maybe changing, being a vehicle really for education reform? If things are working better in the summer, do you think it's going to kind of translate to change during the regular part of the school year?
I certainly hope so. It certainly seems to me that it's critically important not to think of summer as an add-on, but something that becomes integral to year-round education.
Yeah.
And if in the short run we view it as a little bit different and more fluid and, an opportunity to innovate and those kinds of things, that's a good thing. But in the long run, what we learn during the summer, what educators learn during the summer, ought to have implications for the full year.
Absolutely.
Brenda and Bob, one of the points I'd like to make, Bob, of what you just talked about with your new vision is this blended vision. It's an encouraging concept to be able to blend not only core academics but also with enrichment. Even though you do enrich kids in a lot of different ways, and you talked about art and music and athletics, that enrichment is fantastic on itself, but it also enriches the core activities that you're talking about. I liked your idea about staff development. It is an opportunity and a fresh ideas, time for new staff. But the one I really liked is as school districts today are struggling with cutting back on 180 days for budgetary purposes, this new summer school vision is an opportunity to say and send a message that, all the learning doesn't happen between 8 and 2:30 and 180 school days. It also happens year-round. And what a wonderful way to organize a 4 to 6 week program, whether it be at the model programs that you talked about. But this whole notion of increasing that academic time to learn beyond 180 days, what a selling point to policymakers. And this might give you the opportunity, Bob, to reinforce that as you wrap up your policy ideas.
Thank you, Jay. We are definitely working on doing that. We think that it's important to stress that summer is on the agenda, that because the federal government, because the Congress is now looking at reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, that the issue of summer learning ought to be an integral part of that discussion. Well, never mind. I don't know where I was going, but leadership is needed. The National Summer Learning Association is certainly working on this. But we invite anyone who is concerned about these issues and interested in supporting a new agenda around summer or supporting the new vision to be in touch with us.
Okay.
And I think one of the things you brought up, Jay, was, how to make an effective use of partnerships and resources that already exist to help us expand learning. And that's why we are placing such importance on, yes, one approach that some people are trying is extending the school year. Great. However, let's also look at resources that are existing in communities that you can tap into, because just extending the school year doesn't bring the same type of richness to these experiences that it would if you allowed the community to come in and wrap around your support.
And we definitely need to have the community now. I mean, it's very good to be having policy development underway, but we often have to wait for those to happen. And there are kids every year who need this.
Before we go, I wanted to let people know, and I think it's a slide down towards the back, that the National Summer Learning Association has an annual conference, and the next one is going to be in November. I think it's the week before the National Dropout Prevention Conference.
Well, we could go conference hopping. Where's yours?
We can in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And for more information, please visit our website.
Absolutely. So that's certainly something to look forward to. Did you have some more final words, Brenda? Or were we all set?
The only thing I would add is one more date to keep in mind is June 21st, which is National Summer Learning Day. It's the first day of summer. If you have a summer program out there, we invite you to showcase it, celebrate it, invite local parents, kids, policymakers to come see your program in action. And it doesn't have to happen on June 21st. It can happen any day across the summer. But June 21st is the day that we make a very loud noise about it and try to get policymakers to pay attention.
Well, we do
And
want
if you,
Go ahead, Bob.
If you do that, if you are having such an event, then be sure to register it on our website.
Yes.
And we will highlight it, showcase it.
And we do have a link to your website on our page here for the webcast. So we got all those resources, but you'll find the website listed there. And obviously you can find out about the conference and the Summer Learning Day and all kinds of good things coming on. And then, of course, we have the contact information here at the end with Bob and Brenda and how you can directly connect with them as they have so kindly offered to do.
And thanks to you, Marty and Jay, for having us on as guests. It's really wonderful to have this collaboration with the National Dropout Prevention Network, so we really appreciate the invitation.
Well, it's been our pleasure.
Thank you, Brenda and Bob and Marty. When we return here next September, after a wonderful summer learning experience for all of us, our guest will be Pat Davenport of Families and Schools Together, also known as FAST, to talk about engaging families with our students. That'll be on Tuesday, September 14th at 3:30. Every school we go to talks about the need to engage parents, and so we look forward to starting a new school year with some ideas about how to do that.
And this particular broadcast today is going to be archived for you, so if you came in late or you I want to tell a friend about it, it's going to be on our website. And, Jay, when you get your iPod, you're going to be able to download it and walk around the neighborhood and listen to Solutions and learn about this again and again. Thank you, Brenda and Bob, for being here.
Thank you, Brenda and Bob. And thanks to all of you who are listening and participating with us. Remember that we do know why students are dropping out of school. And with the research-based solutions that we're offering with you here in each and every solutions program, we feel excited about how we can move and increase the high school graduation rate. Again, it's all up to you, and our program, Solutions to the Dropout Crisis, will be here again with you next September.